Welcome, everyone. I'm Hannah Nyren. I'm the Digital Marketing Manager at the MIT Press, and this is MIT Press Live. Today we're speaking with a few very special guests. The editor of Entanglements, Sheila Williams, as well as two contributors to the series, Cadwell Turnbull and Annalee Newitz. Hi, everyone. How are you doing?
Good.
So to start off, let's go around and introduce ourselves. Sheila, you're the editor, so I'll let you go first.
Hi, thank you. I'm Sheila Williams, and for the past 16 years, I've been the editor of Asimov Science Fiction magazine, and I've edited a number of anthologies, but this is the first time I've done anything with MIT Press, so I'm very excited about Entanglements.
And Annalee, tell us about yourself.
Sure. I'm a science journalist and a science fiction writer. I've published a number of books, both fiction and nonfiction, which are all focused mostly on science. And I'm a contributor to the New York Times, and I have a column in New Scientist. I am the co-host of a podcast about science fiction and society, which is called Our Opinions Are Correct.
Wow, you sound very busy.
Yes, I am.
And Cadwell, so glad you could join us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I'm a speculative fiction writer. My short fiction has appeared in a few magazines and anthologies. My debut novel, The Lesson, was published last year. I'm just finishing up edits on my second novel, No Gods, No Monsters. And for my day job, I work as an assistant professor of creative writing at North Carolina State University in Raleigh. And I'm happy to be here.
Nice. As a former creative writing major, I'm grateful for your contributions to creative writing.
Thank you.
All right. So to get into it a little bit more, I guess, Sheila, could you tell us a little bit about this particular volume of the 12 Tomorrows series and what it adds to the series?
Sure. So the 12 Tomorrows series there have been 5 previous volumes in this series. And they've all been hard science fiction stories, but this is the first of the series to have a theme. And the theme is the effect of emerging technology on human relationships. And as the subtitle indicates, the relationships can be all kinds, whether friendships or lovers or families. And so, I invited authors to explore this theme using emerging technology and speculating on technology a little in the future. So I think that's what the big difference is, that because the emphasis was on this theme, I came up with the title Entanglements, and then MIT Press seemed to really like the title, so we kind of veered a little bit away from calling it straightforward 12 Tomorrows, but it is very much part of the 12 Tomorrows series.
Awesome. Great. So I know that we have 2 contributors from the series with us today, from this volume of the series with us today. So it would be really fantastic if we could hear a little bit about each of your stories and maybe even hear an excerpt from each of your stories. So Cadwell, could you start us off with telling us a little bit about your story?
Okay, my short story is called Mediation, and it's about a family who's experienced a significant loss, and they've adopted this artificial intelligence to help them cope with this loss. And the artificial intelligence basically helps them talk them through their grief and helps them process their feelings. But my main character does not like it very much. She finds it very invasive. I'm going to read from the first section, which will give you a good idea. Mediation. We had these dinners. They moved around quite a bit, but they were always in June, August, and October. They corresponded with the months of our birth. June for my son Daniel and me, August for my daughter Samara, and October for Isaac, my husband, the father of my children, now dead. I'd been lucky the first year. Samara got very sick on the day we planned late in October, as we habitually placed the dinner. She stayed sick for the rest of the month, so we held off, and then once October slipped into November, we dropped the whole thing, which filled me with surprising relief. A boulder rolling off me, freeing the breath I hadn't realized had been penned in. At Thanksgiving, we made a cake with his name on it, and that was it. I dodged the dinner entirely. This year, I missed the dinner for Daniel and me because of the last-minute conference trip, which was fine since Isaac usually planned those. At least I thought it was fine until Samara revealed her sabotage plans in great detail, involving a 7-cheese casserole. I said that 7 cheeses were far too many. What do you know about it? She asked defensively, and I told her I knew quite a lot, that I had made casseroles over the years. 1 or 2 cheeses were more than enough. Too many cheeses and they drown each other out. It just becomes some vague cheese. She cried and left the room. She got sick soon after, a stomach flu, and stayed in her room for a full week, only coming out to eat breakfast and dinner, talking to herself late into the night. I spent most of July doing my research, so I didn't see them much. In August, I made my Virgin Islands style meatloaf, which Samara loved. I also made a cake because I felt extra guilty. Tamara cried that night too, though she didn't say why when I asked. Again, I thought I could avoid Isaac's dinner or merge it with Thanksgiving, like last time. But Daniel, unusually quiet but suddenly impassioned, said we had to do it, that the tradition needed to survive. I said that they were both getting older, Daniel in his late year of high school and Samara only 3 years behind, and there was no way we'd be able to keep up with the tradition once they were off to college. They both were very upset by this, which of course I understood. Teenage years came with so many changes, great and small, adulthood being the greatest of them all, looming obnoxiously ahead. You've never cared about the tradition, Daniel said, nearly shouting. Not true, I said, though it held a little bit of truth. Sometimes, when my research was at a bottleneck, I found the dinners to be a slight hindrance, taking up a small but noticeably frustrating amount of brain space. I said none of this, but offered nothing else in my defense either. Perhaps you can think of this as a memorial dinner and make it a new tradition, said Ali in its adrenaline dull voice. We all looked at the thing. I asked who left it on. Daniel confessed, a note of something in his voice. Defiance. What on earth did he have to be defiant about? Ali off, I said, and listened to the melodic 3 tones and that signaled that it had fallen asleep or gone dormant or whatever it did. It was more annoying now since we'd uploaded a bit of mediation code onto it, a recommendation by the family therapist. Why I listened, I don't know. At home, I had to keep it off all the time now. Daniel seemed very upset suddenly. Ali on. I said, this isn't the right time to be playing around. We're having a serious conversation. Daniel said, you're erasing him. I said, that's ridiculous. Ali said, maybe you shouldn't dismiss Daniel's feelings. I said, for God's sake, Ali, turn the hell off. There was a distinct pause before Ali whistled her 3-note tune and turned off again. Daniel glowered at me and Samara stared down at her lap. I said I was sorry. I didn't mean that. Let's talk about this later, okay? Samara didn't look up. Daniel said, sure.
Wow, that's a very interesting family dynamic there. Thanks for sharing that. Annalie, tell us a little bit about your story and go ahead and read your excerpt.
Sure. So my story is called The Monogamy Hormone. And it's set, 10, 20 years in the future. And it's about a molecular biologist who is in a classic love triangle. She's fallen in love with 2 people that she's dating, and she really wants to make a choice. And so a friend of hers who is a social media marketer recommends that she take this quack medicine that's based on vole hormones. This is an actual thing where certain voles are monogamous and certain voles are non-monogamous. And so in this future, some crappy biotech company has come up with this idea that if you take some vole hormones, you can make yourself monogamous. And so Edwina, the main character, takes the hormones and just feels kind of gross and isn't very happy about it and can't make a decision still. And so this is a scene where she's talking to her best friend, Alex, and she's just feeling really bummed about what she has, how she's going to deal with this relationship entanglement. So Edwina says, I want to have kids. Nobody will let you marry 2 people and have kids with them. Alex looked more serious than she had ever seen them. You know that's bullshit, right? I can't think of a better place to raise kids than with grown-ups who love each other. They drummed their fingers on the bar and seemed lost in thought for a moment. Marriage is like every other brand that has staying power. Think about YouTube. It used to be part of a private company and it was full of like really bad stuff like Nazis and crazies talking about rounding up gay people. But then YouTube spun off and became part of the public broadcasting network. And now it's all educational programs and people gardening and stuff. That was a major rebrand, but it worked. Most people don't even know that it used to be dangerous for kids to go there. And this is related to my situation. How? Edwina drained her glass. Marriage is another changing brand. It used to be only for cis heterosexuals, but now gay people can get married, at least, well, in a lot of places. People don't think of marriage the same way anymore. Even in North Carolina, where they have those family first laws, people are protesting. Here in California, you can create an indie brand marriage. And you know what happens to indie brands, right? Alex winked. They get appropriated by giant mega brands. Pretty soon, companies will be marketing a placebo for people who want to fall in love with more than one person. I guarantee it. So that's just a little taste of the weird world that Edwina lives in.
That's great. I think that your 2 stories show kind of the range of the topics covered in this collection, because I feel like Cadwell's is very serious and gets into the inner workings of, a large scale relationship with multiple people. And then yours is a little bit more comedic, I would say. So I like the different takes that you have on this topic. And I think Sheila had to check out for a little bit, so she may join us later, but we're going to skip on to the next question, which is about the theme of this volume. So, all of the stories in this collection, as you both presented, are about relationships. So it's kind of an odd combination, relationships and science. What do those 2 topics have to do with each other?
Well, start us off, Cadwell.
Okay, I'll jump in.
I was gonna pick a name.
So, in my story, my main character is a plant physiologist, and that's her science field. She studies plants and how different plants respond to drought stress. In a future where there's food scarcity due to climate change. And she's working, her data is trying to answer a question for the Global Food Index map, which is basically trying to figure out where the best places are to grow certain crops due to how they respond to environmental factors. And my wife is actually a plant physiologist. And so a lot of the research that went into that was me following her around in the lab and asking her really stupid questions. And so a lot of the really smart bits of the story is due to her. But the way that it fits into her relationships is she's doing her plant physiology work, which is based heavily on real science. I'm not extrapolating a lot. People are trying to answer the question of where is the best places to grow food right now. That's what plant physiologists are focused on. And my main character is really good at that work. She's at the top of her field, but she's also using that work to avoid problems at home. And because the artificial intelligence in the story is also her work planner, it takes every opportunity to remind her that she is like shrugging off family plans, which of course she hates. And so like the way that I think about, fusing relationship with science is just to have science be a part of a character's identity. They deal with science in their everyday lives. It's a part of their work. And so it affects their relationships.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's one interesting take. And Annalie, tell us about what you've seen as the connection between science and relationships with this project.
Yeah, like Cadwell, my main character is a scientist, and she's a microbiologist who works on bringing healthy microbes into public schools. And so this is a future where a lot of the research around the microbiome and things like allergies that research has progressed, and scientists have and public health departments have realized that kids are developing things like asthma and other problems because they're in these antiseptic environments where they're not exposed to the kinds of microbes they need to stay healthy. So Edwina's job is to create this kind of glop made of healthy microbes and go into schools and paint it on the walls and help educate local school districts about why this is important and how this will help kids. So she's basically spends a lot of time in the book going into schools and kind of thinking about her love life while she's smearing this stuff on the walls that to us today would seem horrifying. You know, she's really, she's exposing kids to germs. And I wanted to, first of all, just have this kind of realistic picture of where public health might go if a lot of this microbiome research turns out to be true and is accepted. But the other thing is that one of the issues that Edwina is dealing with in her personal life is that she has unconventional romantic feelings. You know, she isn't in love with just one person. She really is genuinely in love with two people, and she wants to marry them and have kids with them. And she lives in a world where, you know, in her tiny little bubble in California, people are like, well, maybe you can do that. It's not legal, but you can do it. But other parts of the country, like they mentioned in the little excerpt that I read, you know, think of her desires as disgusting and horrible, and you know, just as disgusting as smearing a bunch of microbes in a school. So I wanted to have a nice parallel running in the story where you know, scientific discoveries radically change our perspective on how we might want to raise kids. You know, how we might want to expose them to microbes or expose them to danger or whatever. And that kind of transformation also happens in how we understand personal lives, and that as we learn more about people and as we learn more about what's healthy in a family, that changes our understanding of what a family can be. And so that for me is what's really fun about science fiction, is that part of the world building is just this hard science and doing like what Cadwell did, like going into a lab and following someone around. Like that's my favorite thing. Like basically that's being a science journalist, is just following people around and asking really dumb questions in the lab. But the other part is thinking about, you know, world building around new kinds of human connections. And so sometimes that's changed by science and sometimes that's changed by social science.
And I love that as you're telling us the story, like your wall literally has like,
this is a gut microbiome, people. It's very healthy.
those are real germs.
Yeah, exactly. I'm being exposed right now. Hopefully it's gonna help me fend off all the smoke from the wildfires here in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's how it works. Awesome. So thanks for sharing that. I guess my last question for you two before we begin in the Q&A. Oh, there's Sheila.
Hey, Sheila.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I had I was stuck in the audience for a very long time, but I'm so sorry to interrupt. I don't know what happened. I lost the connection and then
It's okay, I'll fill you in.
I heard everybody. I heard you all, but.
Oh, good. Yeah, so the question is still, what do you see as the relationship between science and relationships? How are these two things connected? Because it seems like it might be an odd combination of topics for a volume of this series, but as you know, the two contributors, Cadwell and Annalie, explained, there are a lot of ways where it can connect. But Sheila, do you have any more examples?
Right, yes, thank you. I have a few other, you know, each of the stories in the book is an example of this, but a couple I thought I'd point out are a story by Nancy Kress. Nancy Kress is an eminent science fiction author, and in addition to writing a story for the book, she's also a subject of the profile in this book, which I will also mention is the first time that while the series has profiled a number of science fiction authors, she's the first woman to be profiled in the series. But her story is called Invisible People, and it's about a couple who've adopted a little girl who's now about 8 years old, and they discover that, or maybe she's a little younger than that, but they suddenly discover that it wasn't the innocent adoption they thought it was, and that she has somehow been, her genetics have been altered, and they have to find out how dangerous this is and why it's been done and what they should do about it. So I thought it's a really interesting look at genetic engineering. And of course that would affect family dynamics. Then another story I have is by James Patrick Kelly. It's called Your Boyfriend Experience. And it's about a young man, and he's in a fairly serious relationship, although it's problematic. And he discovers that his boyfriend he knows his boyfriend is an AI designer working on sex bots, but he suddenly discovers that the sex bot is modeled after him, looks just like him, and he's asked to beta test the sex bot by taking the bot out on a date. So it's a very interesting story. And then, do we still have time for me to read from a story? The third story I wanted to mention is a really interesting story by Nick Wolven. It's called Sparkly Bits, and it's about a co-op of moms who have invested in a child. The one woman is the biological mother, but the other women are all part of this co-op who are sort of managing this child, and they're all emotionally invested, but they're also very concerned about his education, his behavior, and quite prescient. The boy is learning at home virtually, he's going to school virtually, and that is, a lot of problems are developing there. And I'll read from the opening of the story.
Can't wait to hear from this one.
What? I'm sorry.
Can't wait to hear this story.
Okay. Oh, great. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay. The contractually mandated monthly meeting was never really exactly a relaxed affair. But this one, Joe decided, promised to reach superlative levels of awfulness. All morning she'd been marching upstairs to Charlie's room, standing at the door with her finger on the ping panel, then chickening out and clumping back to the other moms. Failure. That was the message they sent with their silence, staring up from the table with their diamond hard eyes. The ultimate modern middle-class hazard, a public exhibition of parental failure. You've got to do it, Joe, Aya said after the third attempt, sipping the latte she'd been nursing all morning. You just have to prepare him. While Terry, at the overnecks, turned, nails glinting, and said in a voice that sounded concerned without actually being concerned, it'll be easier on him in the end. Joe checked what was left of the brunch. No pastries, no cinnamon buns, no chocolate in sight. Just a few shreds of glutinous bagel and a quivering heap of eggs. They usually did these meetings at Reggio's, and Reggio's, say what you will about the coffee, was a full auto brunch spot with drone table service and on-demand ordering and seat-by-seat checkout, which was all but vital when the moms got together, when the last thing you wanted to worry about was who got the muffin and who brought organic and who couldn't eat additives or sugar or meat. Whereas when they did these things at the house, the meal always became a test of Joe's home programming skills, likewise the coffee prep, likewise the seating, likewise every other thing. So that's the beginning.
I thought mom was a lot.
Yeah, so the stories in this book really go off in a lot of different directions. They're all deal with the theme, but there are stories about families with children. There are stories about characters dealing with their grandmother or grandfather. And, there are stories about people in relationships like, well, Anna Lee's story is an example of relationships, and Cadwell's is family. So there, you know, many different types of stories in the book, but all dealing with technology.
Great. And again, I love the variety of stories that are included in this volume. So I have one more question left for you all before we go to the Q&A. For the audience, if you have any questions, ask them now, and we'll get to them after we finish our discussion here. The last question I have for you is about, you know, the connection between science fiction and the past and present. How can we kind of reframe our perspective on the present as well as prepare for the future through science fiction? Big question. I'm going to start with Annalee.
Sure.
If you have an answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, science fiction is really appealing as, you know, a sandbox where we can model possible places we might go. And that might be, you know, a distant future. It might be something that's basically in the present. And I think, you know, again, I mean, it really depends on the writer. You know, some people like me tend to, you know, read a lot of scientific articles, whether in the popular press or in the journals, and take inspiration from that and think about like, oh, where might we go next? But I also think that obviously, as much as I would like to be a wizard who can predict the future, I can't. None of us can. So it's really, I think, you know, it's sort of a truism at this point to say that science fiction is really about the present, and it's really about us looking at the present and kind of modeling ways that contemporary trends or issues might play out. So I think it's super useful, especially if you're someone who's working in a lab or working on a technical problem that feels really isolated from social context. Since all of our work is ultimately adopted in society, it's really great to be able to take a piece of technology and kind of spin it up in a social situation and imagine how it might get used, or more realistically, how it might get abused, which is why I love writing about quack medicines, because as soon as I saw that stupid vole study about monogamous voles, I was like, somebody's going to turn this into a frickin' quack medication to like turn people monogamous. So I think that's the fun, but it's a really good thought experiment for anyone who's working in the sciences or tech.
Yeah, definitely. And Cadwell, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel pretty similarly. But yeah, I feel like science fiction is always trying to reckon with the past and the present, either by creating, like taking a negative trend in the present and extrapolating where that might lead in the future. So as sort of a cautionary tale, or taking something from the past and reinstituting it in the future and using the present as a justification, like, you know, indentured servitude or widespread slavery. And so using science fiction to, you know, as a critique. But you can also, and I get really excited about doing this kind of thing, is take something positive trend from the present and extrapolate where that might lead in the future. Progressive policy, alternative economics, sustainable technology, and try to imagine what the future would look like if those things were you know, prevalent and everyone was using it, and you know, we were actually trying to save the planet instead of destroy it. And so for me, it's like, it's a really good opportunity to have a conversation with the present and try to steer the present. I think the work of science fiction, trying to steer the present into a good future by steering it away from, you know, negative trends and pushing it towards more positive ones.
Absolutely. And Sheila, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I mean, I love both of Annalee and Cadwell's comments. And I think, you know, every so often you get the scientist or the astronaut or, you know, person who says, it's because I read science fiction that I had this idea that I decided I could, you know, go into space or do this invention, whatever. So there is that ability. Science fiction has an ability to inspire. It doesn't really predict. I mean, literature is really about its own time, but it can speculate, and it can get it right on occasion, but it also gives people who are involved in STEM some inspiration and encouragement for exploring as well. So it's kind of the chicken and the egg to some extent. And I really enjoy that. And then I just love the stories because all stories are really about humanity. And, but science fiction can explore it in very interesting angles that are always, I find, many different original avenues. So otherwise, I would just reiterate everything Cadwell and Annalee said.
Yeah, and I like your point about how science fiction can kind of inspire the technologies of the future. I think that we've all seen that come to fruition many times, like with the content of Jules Verne's books or things like that. So it's always fascinating to see how that impacts the future. Well, thank you all for joining me. We can go into our Q&A session now. We have a few questions in the queue, but we have plenty of time to answer them, which is a nice luxury. So I guess the first question is for Annalee. And this person said, I feel the most wild science fiction idea presented today was the rebranding of YouTube, which I'm glad they asked this because I kind of wanted to hear a little bit more about how YouTube's going to rebrand to be like PBS. So what led to the decision to include that element? And also, how do we get there?
So as Cadwell was saying, one of the things that's fun in science fiction is trying to imagine the future where there's something that's positive that happens. So not utopia, but what if something really horrible in our world actually got fixed, or was at least a little bit better. And I actually have like a long running fantasy about YouTube becoming a public broadcasting network. This is something that, I think it's preoccupied me for a couple of years now. And because this is my story overall is sort of about how we learn to revalue things in our environment, and we learn how to, understand them in a different way, and they become more positive. I was like, well, it would make sense that this character, who's a social media expert, they're a marketer, that would be kind of their touchstone. And so how would we do it? There's been a lot of discussion over the years about whether Google could really maintain its hold over YouTube, because there are so many legal questions pending about how to regulate YouTube. It's a giant pain in Google's ass. There's, lawsuits around misuse of children in YouTube, on YouTube channels. There's questions around regulation of the algorithms on YouTube. And so I had this idea that, well, maybe that is something that Google would do, is just be like, all right, we're calling it quits. We're selling YouTube, or not even selling YouTube, we're giving YouTube to the government, because in this future, like, the government actually cares about public benefit. And the government is like, all right, it's PBS now. And we're gonna heavily regulate all the content on YouTube and make it educational and, make it safe for kids. And this will be a place that you can plonk your kids down and they'll learn about math. And so I just think that'd be a great use of YouTube. I'd love that if, like, everybody was like like people were generating their own educational videos at home. Like, here's how to make chocolate chip cookies. Like, here's the chemistry behind, how baking soda works. I would watch the hell out of that. I'm all in for public broadcasting YouTube. So it was really just my way of signaling to the reader, oh, this is a future that's different in a way that's good. And it involves government regulation, just like the character's job putting microbes in schools, which is also a government regulation, that schools have to have a certain number of microbes. So I like imagining what would happen if we had good government. It's always a fun fantasy.
I do think it's a unique take, having, the positive side of science fiction, because a lot of times it's like Black Mirror where everything's super grim and foreboding. But yeah, that's one fun thing that could happen. PBS on YouTube.
Yeah. I definitely think that the Black Mirror scenarios are also likely. Weaponized memes are definitely in our future, but it is possible that we could have a couple moments of you know, social media becoming benevolent.
Yeah, and I'm a huge Black Mirror fan, so I would never diss Black Mirror, but
Oh, same.
variety is the spice of life. All right, so we have another question for Sheila this time. How has editing this collection differed from your experience as a magazine editor?
It's very interesting. For me, it's interesting anyways, that it's quite different. You know, editing for the magazine, I just wait. I have a faith in the zeitgeist that stories will come in, and I get, you know, 800 submissions a month or more, and I just have to find 6 stories a month out of those 800 that will work, and they do, you know, and I do, and I put together a magazine, I work with authors, etc. Doing the book, I very carefully selected authors who I really believed could deliver a story for me, but I didn't actually have that complete bedrock of faith because I didn't know, you know, it wasn't an open call for submissions. I asked each author individually to write a story for the book and gave a general length that I was looking for. And I had to, and then waited for the stories to come back, and I was very fortunate. I mean, everything worked out beautifully. There were some stories with revisions, you know, except we went through a couple of drafts, and there was one author who submitted a couple of stories, and 2 stories, and I knew exactly which one I wanted, you know, from, you know, as the editor, I knew which was the one that worked. And, but really there was, and I also staggered the deadlines a bit so that you know, could work with people's schedules. And I kind of like fibbed as to when was the ultimate deadline so that I could.
Aha.
You know, editor's secret.
It's a good trick.
It's a really good trick.
You cannot tell people the ultimate deadline, the real ultimate deadline, because then an editor will have a nervous breakdown. There's no question about that. And there were, you know, several people who came to me and said, "Can I have some more time?" And I was able to work that out. So, so that was of course, with the magazine, I don't have to worry about that. The stories come in, and I use them. Sometimes I use them immediately. Sometimes and sometimes I keep them in my inventory for a little while and use them in the next issue or the issue after that. But of course, with the book, I had to have them all, and I had to deliver them to MIT by basically the end of September. And, you know, and MIT had made it very clear to me that I could not be late. So I think I delivered it to them on the last day. But that was me, because then after I got all the stories, and I had to write the author notes, and I had to write my introduction. I had to do, you know, all the other things that go into figure out the order, the table of contents, all of that, which is all fun, but really has to be done after you get the stories. So yeah, they're very different. They're all.
I think Sheila froze for a second.
Yeah, she's frozen on mine too.
You may need to restart. But to add to that, to escape the sadness of her computer freezing, I'd like to add that I do think what she's saying is that editing a collection is so based on time. And you know, it's one thing getting your short story to her on time, but having all those different contributors and making sure that you get it all done in time that's a lot. It's a lot of work. Anyway, so to go on to the next question for the panelists, what do you like to read, science fiction or otherwise, in your non-work time? Presuming you have time for that.
Not as much lately. Been reading a lot of student stories. But yeah, I like reading story collections, particularly by a single author. I just recently read Ted Chiang's story collection and Carmen Maria Machado's story collection. Um, I like reading urban fantasy. I read a lot of urban fantasy with my wife. We listen to it together and talk about it as we're listening. Um, and then occasionally, I just like really enjoying like a good literary novel. I've been listening to the Nickel Boys recently and been enjoying it a lot.
Nice. Like adding things to my list as you go along. And what about you, Annalie? What have you?
So I also spend a lot of time reading science fiction. I don't read a lot of literary fiction. I got a PhD in English, so I kind of am done with literature forever. I just did it all. Ate all the literature and then just wound up with science fiction.
Right.
And I read a lot of I read a lot of science writing. And I listen to a lot of podcasts about science. Like I listen to the Science Podcast from the AAAS and listen to Shortwave, which is NPR's mostly daily science podcast. I just finished reading a forthcoming novella by P. Jolly Clark called Ring Shout, which was amazing. And unusually for me, it was not science fiction. It's historical fantasy. And Clark is a historian. And so he puts all of this incredibly detailed, accurate history that you might not know about life in the South in the 1920s. But also there's not giant monsters, but mostly giant monsters. And the monsters are the KKK, but they're also supernatural monsters. And so it's a great, like it was one of those books where gave me a lot of satisfaction because the swashbuckling main characters get to destroy the KKK monsters. So that was really fun. And I also just was reading, there's a new Martha Wells novel. She does the Murderbot series, which is just about a cheerful, murderous robot who doesn't really murder that many people, unless they deserve it. But it's a very complicated kind of multi-world space opera, which is both about human identity and trying to right some wrongs. So yeah, I try to have a balance of fiction and nonfiction, and then let them all get squished up together in my head.
So you imagine the actual scientific studies that you've read, like combined with robots and monsters?
Pretty much, yeah. And I mean, sometimes you read a scientific study that is about a robot or a monster. So, like,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, in a manner of speaking, metaphorically. So, yeah, no, it's, I've definitely, I definitely do that, yeah.
Cool. And Sheila, what about you? What have you been reading lately? Nonfiction or fiction?
Well, I read a lot for the magazine, of course, but recently I began Sherry Renee Thomas's collection of short stories, 9 Bar Blues, which is really lovely book. And I'm just a little ways into it, but it's delightful. I do like to read books about science. I haven't had much time lately. It seems like, I don't know what about this working at home all the time seems to absorb more of my time than usual. But I do. I don't read as much science fiction for pleasure because I'm reading so much of it for the job. I have enjoyed Annalie's work, and it's just that I'm, you know, if I really decide I'm going to relax, it might be a book about science or a mystery, or, you know, something that's a little bit different, get away from it. I have gone through my, you know, I used to read a lot of New Yorker stories, but they all kind of started to be very similar to me. And so I say I love stories about, not really into stories about suburbia, looking for a house, but you know, but if
Sheila,
you-
that's the next story I'm going to send to you.
Shots fired.
if you throw a dinosaur,
Yeah, where something twisted happens.
like,
Like,
if you throw a dinosaur into that story,
Okay.
then I just might buy it. You know, they can't be redeemed. They can be redeemed, but they have to have, you know, something fantastic going on in them. So
It gives me an idea. I'm going to submit Suburbia and Dinosaurs to as well.
Oh my God. If you did that, I would read the hell out of that. I wanted dinosaurs who were like, we've got to get out of the city. Like, it's just it's too much crime, too many raptors. Ugh. Yeah.
Those raptors.
now I definitely, you know, I love the fantastic element in stories about, they can be on any subject, but there's got to be something that keep my interest generally, if it's science fiction or fantasy. I mean, I need that. I really love that element of a story and the surprise of it, you know, how it's going to work in each story. It's always different.
yeah, that's fantastic. I don't think I'll ever let go of that dinosaurs and suburbia thing. But I do think the show Dinosaurs, remember the show Dinosaurs?
Yes, yeah.
I feel like that was suburbia, so maybe it does exist.
That wasn't really what I was thinking of, but yes.
Anyway, I think we have one more question, and it is, can each of you share what you're working on next? I guess specifically the contributors, but Sheila might be doing something exciting next as well, aside from her regular job of editing the magazine. But, you know, Cadwell, what are you working on next?
I'm working on edits for the second book. It's called No Gods, No Monsters. It's supposed to be the first of a trilogy, and the way I've talked about it is it's like imagining the civil rights era, but modernized, but with monsters from Caribbean culture and popular folklore. And so having these monsters advocate for their human rights in the modern day. And so it's a lot about it. It's just looking at how culture is affected by that change and how different monsters try to fit into this world that they're entering and being open about their monstrosity within. And yeah, 3 books.
Is it set in the States or in the Caribbean?
It's set, so it's all over the place. It's mostly set in Boston, Boston, Somerville, Cambridge area, because that's where I was living for quite some time. Some in North Carolina, and then some in the Virgin Islands. So like primarily St. Thomas.
Nice.
And so it jumps between those different places, and it jumps around in time a little bit too.
That sounds awesome. I'm working on 2 book projects, one of which is totally done and it's coming out in February. It's called 4 Lost Cities, and it's a science book about new discoveries in archaeology around 4 ancient cities that were abandoned. And these were cities that were very central to their cultures. And so it's sort of looking at how archaeology can show us more about just everyday life in cities, not just what the king was doing or what, you know, the emperor liked to have for dinner, but what just regular people did at bars. And then also why people left. You know, why is it that people would, you know, leave a great city that was so important and powerful and cool in a lot of cases. I mean, a really big city usually has awesome monuments and you know, cool, you know, lakes and all kinds of neat stuff depending on the city. So that was really fun. It took me many, many years to write that and research it. I went to all the cities and hung out with archaeologists and got really dirty and bitten by flies. And so that was really fun. And so, yeah, that's coming out in February from Norton. And then I'm in the middle of writing another novel, which is set about 50,000 years in the future on a planet that's being terraformed by real estate developers. And it's about the people who are doing the terraforming. So the people who've basically been created by the company to be their essential workers on the planet, and how they feel about that. So the main thing that's exciting about this book, The Terraformers, for me right now, is that one of the main characters is a talking moose. So I'm really into exploring moose consciousness. And the moose can also fly, so there's just a lot of good things going on. Yeah, it's an anti-gravity moose. It's far in the future, right? So you want to build a moose, you're gonna make it fly. So
Obviously, I mean, that's only practical.
yeah, so it's a lot of highly speculative hand wavium going on, but mostly it's just about environmental science and how do you build a planet and stuff.
Cool. Well, it sounds like the both of you have a lot of cool stuff coming up, and I'm really excited to read this collection of short stories as well. I think both of your stories sound really interesting, and the one that Sheila read as well sounds really interesting. Oh, you have a picture.
Great.
Put it in front of
I had it at like the perfect, there it is.
Woo! Too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Does everybody have a copy? I hope.
I don't think I have my copy. I think
I
it's
just
at
got mine.
home. I think it's
Yeah.
in Boston. So.
I was using mine to read from. Yeah, I'm so excited about the book. I don't have a new book. I mean, no, don't have another book in the works. I'm working on the magazine, and I am excited that I am actually working in 2021 because it's nice to just skip over 2020. So I'm almost finished with the February issue of Asimov's and of 2021. So there is a future, anyways, and. You know, it's been, this book has been a labor of love for me. I had such a great time putting it together. Working with the authors was wonderful. Everybody in it was just excellent to work with. Everybody, you know, I had editing, you know, asking for revisions went beautifully, perfectly. Some stories didn't need anything, and I'm just so excited about how it all came together. It, you know, so you think about, you have the book of your dreams and the reality, and they're often not right next to each other. But in this case, I really do feel really happy about it. But, you know, the book I imagined is the book I ended up with.
That's amazing. That must be such a good feeling.
Yeah, it was really, it was such a pleasure to be able to participate in it. This is definitely a topic that I'm really passionate about. So it was cool to be able to just be like, good, I'm going to have a romance where they get to be poly. Yay.
I just love your story. Your romance is just so great. I mean, I just wanted to go out for Bad Rosé with all your characters. and I was so moved by Cadwell's story. I mean,
yeah, Cadwell's story made me cry. So thanks a lot.
You're welcome. All your characters were so cool, man. Just the coolest people. Wanted to hang out with all of them.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through a lot of emotions when I read this, but looking
Yeah.
forward to it. I also really want to put Sheila's quote on the back of the book. I want to go out to Bad Rosé with all the characters. Anyway, thanks all of you for joining us. For anyone who missed it, I'm going to share the chat and the link in the chat again. You can find this book on our website. It is on the homepage, so you can just go to mitpress.mit.edu, and you'll find it right there. And then I'm also sharing the link in the chat, as well as, just make sure it's the right one. Yes, it is. As well as a link to alternate ways you can find our books these days. I know a lot of bookstores are starting to open up again, which is pretty exciting because we were very sad for a while when they were closed. But just in case, we have some alternate methods of finding books. And then I also have the link to all of our MIT Press Live events and videos. That page has our schedule, as well as the blog posts and videos of each event. So we record all of them and then we publish them about a week later. So, you know, if you missed the beginning of this one or if you missed the last one, don't worry. There's going to be a video on our blog very soon. We get a lot of questions about that, and yes, it will be available. But again, thank you so much to all of you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
This was awesome.
Yes, thank you very much. It was fun.
Well, have a happy Tuesday.
You too.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.